I represent NASA. So we're going to go ahead and move ourselves into the garden. And as we do that, let me answer the number one question that many people have when they come in here. Are these rockets real? Yes, these are real rockets with one exception. The silver one on my left with the 109D at the bottom, that one is a model. All of the rest of these are real rockets. Now, did these rockets ever fly? No, they didn't. If they'd flown, they would not be here today. These are leftover rockets that could have flown. The other thing to know about most of the rockets here in the garden is that they were originally military missiles, and we converted them for use into the space program. So here's the shady strip we're going to use right now, so if you want to be in the shade, feel free to hang out in here. And if you're fine with the sun, we've got plenty of that to go around today. So I want to take you back in time, all the way back to the year 1987. During the 1950s, we were involved in a Cold War with the Soviet Union. We disagreed with them philosophically, and we were competing with them in each era. So imagine our surprise. We woke up one morning in October 1957 and discovered that the Soviet Union had launched a satellite into orbit around the Earth. No one had ever done that before. That satellite was called Sputnik. It was about the size of a beach ball, and it went beep, 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 beep as it orbited the Earth. Well, we knew we had to respond to that, and in January 1958, we launched our first American satellite into orbit. That satellite was called Explorer 1. It launched on a rocket just like this. So here, the rocket is the letter D on it. That is the Juno 1 rocket. And if you look way at the top, that thing that looks like a white crown, that's where the satellite is located.
You folks can come on up in the shade if you like.
Now, this particular satellite had a gyrocopter built into it. There was a theory at the time that the Earth is surrounded by cancer radiation. A gentleman named Dr. James Van Allen, one of the proponents of that theory, helped design the satellite. That Juno 1 rocket lifted off. We put the satellite into orbit, and we did prove that those radiation bands exist. Today, they're known as the Van Allen belts. Well, we would launch bigger payloads than Juno 1. We turned to a rocket just like the white one over here that has NASA written on it. This is the Juno 2 rocket. We had some early problems with the Juno 2, but one of its first successes was the flight of a probe called Pioneer 4. Pioneer 4 is designed to fly by the moon to take pictures of the moon. Yeah, we didn't get quite as close to the moon as we hoped we would. We missed it by about 37,000 months. But we're still learning how to do stuff. Another rocket we used to launch during the satellites is one just like the one next to us here. This is the Thor Delta rocket. Thor Delta was instrumental in launching our earliest communication and weather satellites. The very first of those communication satellites was a big silver IR balloon called Echo. And one of the most famous communication satellites at the time was called Telstar. Telstar was very popular in culture. In fact, it was a British rock group with a song called Telstar. And the satellite. Now, it was great. We were learning all these new skills and a lot of information by launching satellites into orbit, but we wanted to put a person into space. We recruited military test pilots, and we selected 7 of the best and the brightest to become our first astronauts, what was called Project Mercury. These guys were really competitive. They competed with each other in lots of different ways because each one of them thought he was going to be the first person in space. As it turned out, they were all wrong. Because in April 1961, the Soviet Union launched Yuri Gagarin into orbit. He was the first person in space. He did one orbit a year, and we are favoring our things again. We are still running behind what was becoming known as the space race. Less than 1 month later, May 5th, 1961, we did launch our first American astronaut into space. His name was Alan Shepard. He launched on top of the Mercury Redstone rocket. Just like the rocket with the red United States, the black and white stripes, and that black bell-shaped capsule is the Mercury capsule. It held 1 astronaut. Shepard's flight right up 116 miles. Arc building in Atlantic Ocean. Splash down in Miami near the Bahamas. Total flight time is about 15 minutes. Just 20 days later, President Kennedy issued a challenge. He said, "We are going to send a man to the moon and return safely by the end of the decade." Well, NASA's response to that challenge was something like, "Say what? You got a total of 15 minutes experience in space. You've flown all the way to the Bahamas. We have no more management of Mercury and Redstone rocket, but we really wanted to put an American in orbit around the Earth. To do that, we needed to build a rocket. We turned to the Atlas rocket, just like the silver one there with the flag of the United States, and again, also the big Mercury capsule at the top. Atlas was originally built as our first intercontinental ballistic missile, or ICBM. So again, we converted it to using the space program. In February 1962, John Glenn became the most famous man in the Western world, the first American to use orbit. He did 3 Earth orbits and a very successful mission. He had 3 more manned missions on the Mercury Atlas rocket, and by the end of Project Mercury, he had proved that man could exist in space. He discovered our high-born cloud up Elizabeth of oil. We did learn that we could eat and sleep in space. But if we were going to get to the moon, in fact, we also had to learn how to work in space. We moved to Project Gemini. The Gemini capsule held 2 astronauts. If you look over here, there's a big silver rocket with black and white stripes at the bottom, and some stripes at the top. This was originally built as an intercontinental ballistic missile. If you look way at the top of this one, that black thing up there is a Gemini capsule. We have another mock-up of the Gemini capsule right down here in ground level. You can check that out in just a little bit. We had a number of firsts that were part of the Gemini program. We had our first American spacewalk, and right, the Gemini 4. We had our first rendezvous in space where there were 2 Gemini capsules in orbit at the same time, Gemini 6 and 7. Now those 2 capsules never physically touched, but they got so close to each other that 2 crews could see each other out of the windows of their respective capsules. Gemini 7. It was, at that point in time, the longest duration American spaceflight. Gemini 7 was in orbit for 14 days. So, I want you to take a look at this capsule here on the ground, a couple of the Gemini capsule. I want you to imagine sitting next to someone else in that amount of space for 14 days. Yeah, you can't stand up during that time. You have to work with that person, sleep with that person, eat with that person, etc. But you don't know what the etc. is. Anybody here think you could do that for 14 days? Yeah, you don't see my hand raised either. These guys were tough. So, by the end of Project Gemini, that took place in 1965 and 66, we were excited. We were ready to go. We said, hey, we've learned all these new skills, now let's go to the moon. We moved to Project Apollo. And if you follow me, I'll tell you the rest of that story. The Apollo capsule was bigger still. It held 3 astronauts. To get it into space, we needed a bigger rocket. We turned to the Saturn 1B rocket, just like the one you see in front of us lying inside. The Saturn 1B is one of only 2 rockets here in the garden that was not originally a military missile. Saturn 1B was built specifically for human spaceflight. In January of 1967, the Apollo 1 astronauts, Leslie and Wayne, were doing the dress rehearsals of their launch inside the capsule, top of the rocket, out on the launch pad. Inside the capsule, 2 ladders spiked while the flash fire fitted the capsule. And unfortunately, she lost all of the astronauts. That was a tragedy. But at the same time, it was a wake-up call for NASA. They pulled back. They totally re-examined the Apollo capsule They made over 1,300 changes to it. A little less than 2 years later, October 1968, NASA launched Apollo 7 into orbit around the Earth on a Saturn 1B rocket, just like the one we see here. That mission was so successful that NASA said, "Our very next flight, we're going to the moon." But to get to the moon, we needed an even bigger rocket yet. We turned to the Saturn V. Now, we don't have a Saturn V rocket here in the garden. Hopefully, you were able to take our bus tour a little bit earlier today. If you did, you got to see a real Saturn V rocket. And if for some reason you weren't able to do that, trust me, this thing is huge. How big is it? Well, see the length of the Saturn 1B line on the slide? Almost double. So in December 1968, NASA launched Apollo 8. We sent 3 astronauts to the moon, put them in orbit around the moon. On Christmas Eve, we sent back a very moving photograph of the lunar landscape with the Earth rising in the background. Very dramatic photo sent to the entire planet. We followed Apollo 8, Apollo 9, 10, then July 1969, we did land our first man on the moon with Apollo 11. Alright, let's just do a quick quiz here. Can anybody tell me what's the first person that stepped foot on the moon? Neil Armstrong. Very good. Now, how about the second person that stepped foot on the moon?
It's gotta be
Buzz Aldrin.
no.
Not Buzz Lightyear. So we'll use those two. So we had 6 man moon landings, only 12 people that ever walked on the moon. They all launched right here at the Kennedy Space Center. Apollo 17 was our last moon landing, but it was not the end of the Apollo program. From there, we moved to Project Skylab. Skylab was our first attempt at building the U.S. space station. We had several Skylab missions. We went back to using the Saturn 1B rocket to get our astronauts up to Skylab. The longest of those missions was 84 days in duration, so we did prove that man could stay in space for an extended period of time. The very last Apollo mission had a special significance. In 1975, we launched 3 American astronauts into orbit around the Earth, and at the same time, the Soviet Union launched 2 Soviet cosmonauts into orbit in their Soyuz capsule. Those 2 capsules rendezvoused. They visibly docked. The 2 hatches opened. American astronaut and Soviet cosmonaut reached out and shook hands in space. So to bring all this full circle, we went from the 1950s, when we were in total competition with the Soviet Union, to the mid-70s, where at least in the arena of spaceflight, we were moving to more of an era of cooperation. Now, we built other rockets since then. That's a segue to introduce the newest rocket here in the garden, the big blue Delta II rocket that you see over here. We never launched astronauts on the Delta II, but this was a workhorse rocket for NASA and the military. It flew 155 missions over a nearly 30-year lifespan. The earliest rovers we sent to Mars, Sojourner, Spirit, Opportunity, Phoenix Lander, all launched on the Delta II rocket. We sent a mission to an asteroid, a mission to a comet, and most of the GPS satellites orbiting the Earth today, we all use GPS on their cell phones, they launched on the Delta II. The very last Delta II mission launched just 7.5 years ago. So, we welcome the Delta II into our family of rockets here in the garden. With that, it does end our rocket garden tour. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, stick around for a minute. Again, my name is Richard. Please enjoy the rest of the